Well, this is the Big Friendly Swim podcast. I'm the Big Friendly host, and today's guest is a six-time Georgia State champion and a recent Actually, you're not quite graduated yet at NC State. I'm guessing you still got finals coming. You still got the rest of the semester or the quarter. But Abby, how are you?
I'm good. Thank you so much for having me on today.
Thanks for being on. So just to start things off, what initially drew you to NC State, and like what got you to commit to the team?
Yeah, honestly, when I was going through recruiting, I wasn't necessarily like looking for all of the like bling bling, I guess. And I mean, I'm sure you know our pool isn't exactly the fanciest thing ever.
It's funny. That's the same thing your coach said that Braden Holloway said was that the pool didn't have a lot of bling bling.
Yeah, it's, a little old. But that was actually something that drew me to state. I really liked the setup of the pool. Like I kind of liked how the stands are like almost on the pool deck. It just kind of makes dual meets that much more fun. Because the crowd is like right there, especially when we like really pack it in. And I also went to a dual meet on my recruiting trip. It was at Duke, so I think that was why we were allowed to go. And I think that also seeing like the atmosphere in the crowd that they had at Duke, which it wasn't even our home pool, even though it's right down the road, was another thing that kind of drew me to state. And I also was so recruiting was I was the class that our junior year started recruiting. And so my trip overlapped with the men's class above me, their like commit visit. So I met some of the men that I was then on the team with, which also like helped me a little bit because I spent a lot of time with them plus the team on the trip. And I was just really drawn to the family atmosphere, which you've probably heard like a thousand times. Um, but I feel like from my trips, like it was the one that like I felt the most at home with, in terms of like the team and the school, because I liked the smaller campus. Like today, when I was running late, I was walking all the way across campus, but it only took me like 15 minutes. So that those were like the main things that like really drew me to state.
You talked about like that family atmosphere, and like I interviewed in just the last year. I interviewed the your head coach. I
Mhm.
interviewed Kennedy Noble, Nils Trostanje, and David Curtis, all of whom obviously spent a lot of time at NC State.
Mhm.
And it's the number one thing they talked about of how much they love the team atmosphere and the team culture. And I'm wondering if you can give sort of your take on that and how the team culture like shaped your experience on the team.
Yeah, I mean, I would say the probably the team culture and just the athletes that I was surrounded with was probably like the biggest impact on myself. Like, obviously, over the 4 years, I've learned a lot, and there's a lot of things that I wish my younger self could have known. But everyone always says you grow through what you go through, and that was definitely very true. And so, like, my sophomore year, I was diagnosed with REDS, which is like relative energy deficiency in sport, which I feel like ended up defining a lot of my career. But I honestly like the reason I like kept going and like stayed through it, not only like was because of like there are personal reasons of like, wanting to see it through and kind of seeing where you can still go, but also just like the people on the team. I definitely, if I didn't click as well with them, like I might not have been able to make it all the way through just because like it is grueling hours all of the time
Yeah.
and not necessarily seeing like the performance outcomes when that's like what you're training for so much, like obviously makes it a little bit harder, a little more heartbreaking, I guess. But being around like these people and also like seeing their success, and it really a lot of the time comes back to like not being defined by your success and knowing that like all the people on the team still loved me no matter what. And I feel like it speaks a lot to the people that were on this team. Like probably some of the silliest people I've met in my entire life. Um, and I feel like that is like a big part of our team culture. Like we kind of just keep it fun, keep it silly a lot of the time, which I think brings a lot of people to some of their best performances just because we're having fun behind the blocks in practice. So I would definitely say that the team has had a huge impact on my life, probably the biggest impact, and what I will definitely take away from the sport in the future.
You know, you talk about like the like how much fun you guys have, and NC State's
Mhm.
always been one of my favorite teams. Like they all like it's really hard for me to pick like my favorite collegiate team, but NC State's always been sort of rotating in the top three because you guys look like you're having so much fun all the time. Like all the social media videos I see, all the interactions like on people's stories that I see, it just looks like you guys are having such a good time.
Yeah, honestly, I feel like 90% of the things we say we're just like joking. Sometimes I'll go to like repost something on my story and like what I type on it, I'm like, wow. People that like don't know us are gonna be like, what are you talking about? But like I know that everyone like on the team is like probably laughing a little bit.
Yeah.
Everyone's like, we all get it. So
So this is something that I always love talking to seniors or fifth years or people who've come to the end of their collegiate career is now that all is said and done and like you've done your last races, compare your feelings now to your feelings after you'd finished your first year.
that's a good question. Um, I feel like my feelings towards the people like on this team and the people that I've met have really only been like reinforced because I feel like each year that you're on the team, like my love for all of these people just got a little bit deeper as I like got to know everyone, even though like yes, the team technically changes every year because the seniors leave, the freshmen come in. But I feel like the team dynamic that we've like kept through it all has just kind of reinforced like why I came to the school. Um, I feel like my feelings overall, like towards swimming, definitely like changed throughout it. Especially with like my experience and not having the like college career that I thought I would was definitely hard at times because I feel like there were points where I was like, what am I doing? But then I feel like by the end, like I still love swimming and I still love the sport and it's a lot of fun, which I feel like is a good thing to something I'm like happy I'm still taking away because I know like a lot of the time people might no longer like the sport at all, which it just comes and goes. It's a hard one. um so I feel like my feelings overall have really only like been reinforced and kind of gotten deeper and I'm still like proud of the like junior year of me that was like, okay, I'm gonna go to NC State and like all of the people that I've met. But I would say I've definitely learned a lot. So maybe I'm better from it.
You know, you talk about like that feeling of like after you're done and like knowing more and knowing more about yourself.
hmm
And like I remember, because I swim for community college. I swim for my local community college, and I don't know how it works, or if you know how it works for community colleges. But in California, you only get 2 years at a community college,
hmm
and then if you transfer, you can use your other 2 years somewhere else. But maximum 2 years at a community college. COVID actually extended my college career by 2 years because our first season got cut off in 2020,
Okay.
and then our sophomore season didn't count, and we could compete against however many teams we wanted as often as we wanted. So my technically my freshman and sophomore year were 2022 and 2023.
hmm
So you just talk about those feelings of like knowing more about yourself and like not knowing back in your junior year of high school where you'd be at the end of your collegiate career, and it just reminded me of like I bawled, by the way, at the end of after my last race. I bought my because I wear those like the goofy like Swedish goggles like the without like the rubber padding,
Uh-huh.
and my coach clowned on them for years. So as a joke, I bought him a pair of them. And I just went up to this is such a long tangent, I'm sorry. But I went up to him and I like like I was like, "This is for you," and just started sobbing. And then he started crying too, and we both started laughing. But you just talked about those emotions of like having that time and having those experiences with your teammates and with your coaches, and it just reminded me of that.
Yeah, I definitely. I mean, that's kind of hype that you got 2 more years out of it. I feel like,
Yeah,
it's like kind of another one of those things that it's like in hindsight, again, like I've learned a lot. Like when you're going through it, you don't really like realize until like later on you're like, oh, because for like a while, like we didn't necessarily lose that much to COVID, like for our like college career, because my freshman year was COVID year. So like going in. So we still had the whole year. It was just like we didn't have dual meets our first semester and then like we wore masks and stuff like that. So you feel like you're like, oh, like I'm still getting like the whole like I'm still practicing. I'm still
yeah.
on campus. Campus was actually empty for us because like everyone else had to go home
That must have
basically.
been kind of awesome.
Yeah, so we were like, this is great. And then like in hindsight, sometimes I'm like, that was like probably like the worst time to hit COVID, like going into college because it was like this whole change. Like you're going to college, you're now on your own. Like I'm doing different practices, I have different coaches. And like we couldn't go into the coaches' offices because like they basically weren't in the offices themselves. And we're like wearing masks. And so like in hindsight, sometimes I'm like, what would have happened if I hadn't have had COVID going into my freshman year. But then at the same time, I'm always like, well, I learned a lot from it. And, it's kind of like one of those impactful things on my life. So it's like a give and take relationship, I would say.
Yeah, it's definitely something that like everybody both lost something and gained something out of it. Like everybody had a different experience. It's such a fun question when I interview people, like hearing about their COVID experiences,
Mhm.
because I've done like over 50 interviews at this point with people like both in the US and internationally, and I've never gotten the same answer twice.
Yeah. We always
Everybody's
joke
going through
about,
something different.
yeah, we always joke about we actually got moved out of our dorm rooms, like, because we had two people in our dorm rooms. And the rule was like, if you were on campus, you had to have your own bathroom. So we had like a bathroom for two people. So we got moved into our own rooms. So we would push the beds together. So we all had mega beds, was what we always said. So, like, we're always like, yeah, it was great. Like, we had mega beds. Like, it was fantastic. And then, like, sometimes in hindsight, I'm like, but I lived by myself. Like, it was like, oh, so
It's
I
those
feel
like
that,
goofy memories.
yeah.
I remember like during the height of COVID, like in like summer 2020, my swim team, we made a Minecraft server. My college team. So a bunch of like 18 to 22 year olds just all on a Minecraft server losing our mind for like 6 months. It was glorious. It was so silly, but we had so much fun.
Yeah. There's always good things that came out of
Yeah.
it.
You talked about that diagnosis that you got your sophomore year. That was something I didn't know about.
Mhm.
Um, and I'm wondering if you're comfortable, talk about that initial feelings after you got that diagnosis and how it affected you in the pool, and whether or not there was a conversation with your coaches on like what your next steps would be.
Yeah, so I like didn't swim very well like my freshman year. And I think that that was hard with COVID because I was really close to people on the team, which was like obviously what like kept me going. But also like I wasn't as close with the coaches because I couldn't like just go in and like talk to them. And so I think it was also challenging because I was like doing all these things that I was like, I should be able to do this like just fine. Um, and I was just like, okay, like maybe I'm like in my head, like I'm surrounded by like new people. Maybe I'm just like I need to like focus on like my mental game or whatever. But it kind of got to where like I just couldn't like make it through practice, but like I couldn't almost like start out even making it through practice. But I think it was like gradual enough that I didn't realize like all the changes in my life like as fast. So then in my sophomore year, like it wasn't getting better. So I was like, okay, like maybe I should be like looking into this. So like, doctors, like through my trainer, like trying to figure things out. And it's one of those things that I think they it's like it used to be called the female athlete triad. And they kind of like changed the name because like it can also occur to men. But it's like one of those newer things that is like becoming more prominent. So I think it was like more challenging for them to kind of be like, okay, like this is probably what you have versus like just overtraining or like low iron or, all the various things that everyone goes through at some point, probably in their athletic career. And so I think that it was hard for a while because I just didn't know what was going on, but I also didn't know how to be like, I feel like something's wrong, but I can't tell you what because I look fine. Like I'm the same person in theory. And so then I think getting that diagnosis, like I was kind of like, okay, I have an answer. Like it's almost like an invisible injury, I guess. Like it is technically like something that you need to be like rehabbed through. But then, so I'd say for like a little while I felt better about it, and still sometimes I do because I'm like, well, like it's easier, I guess, to like not be as hard on myself because I'm like, well, I wasn't just like not swimming as well. Like there was a reason, I guess. Um, but it was also hard because there's not really like a treatment plan for it. So instead of like just being out, like if you like break your leg, there's like a whole treatment plan for it and rehabilitation for like how to get in. So I definitely think that that was hard because I was still like, okay, I have more left to give. Like I think I can like get faster. Um, but then it was like very like up and down through like basically my whole career. So the coaches actually wrote me up a plan like when I was getting back in because I took some time off and worked on like easing me into it. And through the rest of my 2 years, like I never did a full schedule, like three doubles a week. I usually like had one practice off or something. So they were good in kind of trying to figure it out, but it also was a little bit of like a free balling it because there like isn't really a diagnosis or a treatment plan to it. So I feel like it was a little bit of a mixed bag, like a little bit of a relief because I was like, okay, this wasn't all in my head. Um, Something was up, but also like only took me so far in terms of like what exactly to do with it.
It was like
Because
half of an answer.
yeah, especially in swimming, because I think that a lot of the research around it is in runners, because I think it's like pretty easily diagnosed in runners, because like a big thing with it is like low bone density. And so in swimming, you don't really have as much impact because I'm swimming in a pool versus like running. A lot of the time they might end up with like fracture, a stress fracture or something. Um, so I think it's like there's a lot more research around it in running, especially in like professional athletes. And I feel like you have a little bit more of a say over your career in like professional sports because you're not limited to your like 4 years of college.
Yeah.
So I think it was a little bit harder to like free ball it in swimming and like how much time do you take off? Like what did you hear? What did you do there? So hopefully it'll get better as the sport goes on. So I'm like, well, at least maybe I'm leaving the sport better than I found it, and helping future generations because it's not like it's gonna go away in like younger females or males like overnight. So only time will tell.
The last year on my team, somebody said something that like rubbed me the wrong way. And there's a point to this tangent, I promise.
I believe
Um,
you.
and he said that like, oh, why do we even need the people who get seventh or eighth or ninth? Like, what we just need like the first and second place people.
Mhm.
And it's something that I've never believed that to be true. So like, I think that even though like your college career probably didn't go the way you were expecting or the way you were hoping, teams need those athletes who will make a B final, make a C final. Like our women's team at our conference meet had 8 swimmers. And we had people who barely scraped into 8th place in an A final.
Mm-hmm.
And they would move up. They'd go from 8th to like 5th. They had 8 swimmers and they beat the 3rd place team by 15 points. And that team had 20 athletes. So it's just, yeah. Like it was a feat of both athletes swimming and my coach figuring out who to put in the right event at the right time.
Mm-hmm.
But it's just something that reminded me of like you talking about like those changes that you needed to make in your training and probably how it affected your overall races. And like I don't know if it's any consolation, I don't know if it means anything, but I think that teams are only as good as their last place finisher or their second to last place finisher, because those people will still score and they'll still bring up the team. I don't know if that makes any sense. It's just
No, it does make sense. I think that was something that like I struggled with for like a little while, and honestly like still sometimes, when I'm sitting there thinking because I feel like for a while I was like, cuz I came in like I could have gotten like 6th or 7th in ACCs my freshman year in like the 2 free. And I never even went to the meet because like I wasn't swimming fast enough, and we have a really good like deep team. And
yeah.
I'm proud of all of them that went to the meet every year. And so I think that for a while I was like, well, like they're really fine without me, like speed wise. Like they're gonna be fine. Like what am I doing? Um and it was like kind of something I like went in circles over for like a while. Cause I also knew like socially outside of it, I was like, well, I'm like really good friends with all these people. Like I love being around them. And I actually went to coffee with one of my coaches, and we're like sitting in this coffee shop, like both crying, like a little bit. Like people around us were probably like, what is going on? After we'd been sitting there for like an hour just talking about like, you go on all the tangents, and then you like
Yeah.
circle back like what you're talking about. And we were just talking about like the impact you make, like whether or not you're like scoring or you're like the fastest and things like that. And I feel like that's always like a good reminder, because our sport is so like individualized but also like team oriented, which I feel like almost makes it like more complex and almost a little bit harder, just because you're like, well, individually I'm not doing as well as I want to, but then at the same time, like you're in the pool, like pushing your teammates every day, whether or not you then are scoring the points yourself, but you probably help push someone to get to their best time. So it's a little bit of like a give and take and kind of a reminder of that, which is always, there's a lot of things I think are just easier said than done. And so it just takes like a lot of time to be
Yeah.
like, okay, like I did still have an impact. Like it was still fun. Like I still wouldn't, like if I was asked if I would do it again, like I would sign up, do it all over again, no matter like how hard it was.
My college coach told me there's rumblings of community college athletes getting a 3rd year of eligibility, and I'm like, I don't care how old I am, I don't care where I'm at, I will come back and I will do that 3rd year. Like I would go back and do it again right away. You talk about like those moments of like teammates pushing each other, and I'm a distance swimmer, unfortunately.
Uh-huh.
And I had a race with one of my teammates where it was a mile, and we were about I was a body length ahead of him for the whole race.
Mhm.
And about 200 yards left, he starts outsplitting me by about
Uh-oh.
a quarter of a second, half a second, like nothing crazy, like nothing big enough that I really noticed it, until we flipped with a 50 left and he is right next to me.
Mhm.
And I have a video of like us going into the last 25 yards, and at the flags going into the wall, I am ahead of him. And then he touches the wall and he's 6/100ths ahead of me. But it was my teammate, and he was like he's one of the nicest guys. Like we were both exhausted. We were both so happy. But the point of that story is we both got in top 8.
Hmm.
We ended up placing 7th and 8th in our conference. And then combining with like our two teammates who got first and second, we ended up making up half of the top 8. And we both agreed like we wouldn't have been there without
Hmm.
each other. So it's like you're so right. Like those moments of somebody could get like 8th place and go a huge lifetime best time, and it'll motivate their teammate who gets first or second, just because you guys do have that bond outside of the pool. Like you do have that friendship outside of the pool, and you want to see each other succeed in whatever form that means for the individual person.
Hmm.
So with your college swim career coming to a close, what's next for you after this? Because you've talked about wanting to get a master's degree in occupational therapy. Is that still a goal that's on the horizon?
Yeah, it is. I've applied to schools and I'm still in the process of figuring out where I'm gonna go, but that's still the goal.
Awesome. I I don't know what I was gonna say. And then didn't you also minor in nutrition?
Hmm. Yeah, I have a minor in biology and in nutrition. The biology one, like low key, just fell into my lap with like the bio credits I had to get um for occupational therapy, like prereqs with my psychology
Yeah.
degree. And then it was like I only needed one more credit to get the minor, and I was already like far enough ahead in school that I was gonna run out of credits to make it through my senior year. So I was like, okay, I'll add a bio minor. And then with everything that like I always thought like nutrition was interesting, so I was already gonna take intro to nutrition as a like just an extra class, like a free elective. That's the word I was thinking of. And so then I just was like, well, maybe I'll get a minor in it because I needed credits to fill, but also I've always thought it was kind of interesting, and then it just kind of got more interesting with like my Reds diagnosis and like making sure I was eating enough like as an athlete, and then just learning more about like food as medicine. So I was like, I'll get a minor in it. I don't know if I can do anything with a minor in the real world, but
But
I've
it's
learned
nice to have.
things.
It's nice
Yeah.
to put on the resume.
Yeah, I've learned some cool things, one could say. So,
So, Abby, my last set of questions for you here. We're going to take things back to high school and club swimming. Talk about your experience competing on Dynamo Swim Club is a fairly, at least in my opinion, at least in my swim nerd opinion, Dynamo Swim Club is a fairly well-known club team. And then you also won 6 national titles in your high school career. Talk about like that experience competing on Dynamo Swim Club and how you feel that connected you to your high school swim career and set you up for those state titles.
yeah, I feel like swimming for Dynamo definitely set me up a lot for kind of what I was looking for in college and being prepared for college swimming. I feel like the group of people that I swam with at Dynamo were also silly, goofy, one could say. And I feel like we just had a lot of fun, and I had a really good relationship with my coach. So I feel like that kind of set me up for like the environment I was looking for in college. And obviously swimming for such a big club provided me with like a lot of opportunities that I might not have had otherwise. Because I might have, like, I qualified individually for a lot of meets, but then I was able to swim on like relays with other people that we placed really well just because we we had enough like people at that level versus like a club that might be smaller. And I think that it set me up a lot for like being prepared for the hard sets and everything in college. There's definitely still things on club that I'm like, how did I even do that? Like now at this point, like graduating college. So I think it set me up for that well, and also kind of what kept me going because I really like when I do like a really hard set and like you do well and you finish it and you're like, yeah, like that was kind of, it might not have been fun during, but like you finish it and you're like, that was kind of fun.
Yeah.
And I think that that was kind of what kept me going a lot through it was like still enjoying the training. Not to say it wasn't all sunshine and rainbows, but I do think it took me a little bit of time to be proud of even those like state titles because I always was like, well, there's more coming like in college, and even if it wasn't the career I wanted, I feel like having that background still set me up to like have the mental toughness, I think, to still make it through my 4 years, regardless of the racing outcomes, and still enjoy the practices and some of the things that I still did in practice, whether or not it translated into a race. Um, and I mean, high school state was always a really fun meet. We never like tapered for it and stuff because my coach was always like, "You're gonna be fine." And so it was always like a lot of fun to go, which I think was always a reminder of like fun swimming is fast swimming because I would always swim pretty well. And my high school team wasn't, we were like in Georgia, it's like 1A to 3A, 4A
Yeah.
to 5, 6 and 7. So we were in 1 to 5A, but we were a 1A school because I went to like a small private school. So it was always like an eclectic meet, I guess, because we were just like thrown in the mix. It was so random. But it was always fun. And my dynamo coach always like went and like filmed our races, and sometimes we could like we would talk to him like later on. And so I think that those are something that I'll always be proud of, but it definitely took me a minute to be like, like that wasn't like an easy thing to do. And it wasn't a fluke. It just, I was just young.
Yeah. Abby, thank you so much for sitting down with me. I know initially you had some misgivings that you might not have that much to talk about or that much to say.
Yeah.
And I can promise you with some certainty that this is definitely one of my favorite interviews that I've gotten to do. So thank you so much for sitting
Thank
down with
you.
me.
Thank you so much for having me on. It was a lot of fun.